Today, I am so excited to bring to you an interview I've done with Lauren Sergy. Now, Lauren is a communications expert, and what that means is that she helps people be able to speak more confidently and with more authority. She's also an expert speaker herself, and she brings to us so much interesting information, not only about how you can communicate better to get better clients and build your business, but also how to become a professional speaker yourself. So welcome again to the Solopreneur Life Podcast. We are all about building and scaling your business so you can enjoy the freedom and flexibility that comes with running a six-figure business that meets your needs. Take a moment now to hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And then we'll dive right in. Well, hello, Lauren. Welcome to the Solopreneur Life Podcast. Tell us a little bit about your business.
I am a public speaking and communication coach and trainer, professional speaker, because of course that's all in the same realm. So I sometimes like to say that I'm the speaker who speaks about speaking, but really it is all focused around interpersonal communication skills. If you're doing it face to face with an individual, using your mouth to form the words, that's what I help out with.
That is so interesting. So what got you into that?
From the great story starts with me being the world's worst librarian, not because I was so terrible at librarianing itself. I do have my master's in the degree, but because I just wasn't terribly interested in the work. But what I loved and what I was constantly getting pushed into doing by all of my colleagues and all of my jobs was training, was speaking. They'd say, you can convince people to do anything, Lauren. You go train this angry library staff group to use the database that they absolutely loathe and never want to touch. I'm like, okie dokie. So I would go off and do that. And in those training sessions, afterwards, whether I spoke at conferences or at individual libraries, people would come up to me and say, that was awesome. Never thought I would want to use that database. Databases are really boring, by the way. Never thought I'd want to use that database. Can you come back and teach us how to speak like you speak? Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a direct request from people. And my immediate response was, yes, of course, I can teach anyone how to do this because I have a background in acting, in radio work, in performance, in English, in classic rhetoric. And all of that kind of came together to create a process by which I approach communication. And it's really systematic. It is very, very human, like it focuses on how people actually think and process information in the real world instead of in an ideal world. And I was able to break it down in a way that made sense. So the business almost fell into my lap.
That's wonderful. That really is the ideal. We just kind of dream. Somebody please tell me what you want.
What do you want from me? We want you to teach us how to speak. Okay.
I can do that. Right. That's awesome. So how did you break it down? I mean, what is this systematic process that you've come up with?
Well, the initial process of, and still how I create presentations and talks today, you can reach right back to high school English and follow the 3-part essay formula. I kid you not. We use it because it works. It appeals to the human brain for a number of reasons. It's easy to remember. It's easy to stay on track. It forces you to condense your message. All of these things that you have to do if you want to communicate well. So that was what I kind of formed the foundation of my business, was teaching this approach to giving formal presentations. And from there, it grew into, okay, well, how do I do this in a meeting? Okay, this is how meetings work. Here's how you break it down. Here's how you do it with a impromptu sort of environment. You're still following a hyper-focused message and overall concern with the audience perspective and their point of view and how they are interpreting your info instead of how you think is important, because you don't matter. And when you're communicating, it's all about the person that you're speaking to. Here's how you apply that here. Now, here's how you apply it to different staffing scenarios. So, it all comes about this understanding that People need hyper-focused messages. They need them to be expressed repeatedly when you're speaking to them for them to become memorable. And you cannot pile in too much information, otherwise people get lost. And then you apply that to different communication scenarios over and over and over.
Okay.
And there you have it.
Now, traditionally, and the way we've constantly been told to speak is tell people what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. Do you align with that, or have you taken a different approach?
It's a nice little pithy statement that holds a lot of truth. It's one of those easy things that kind of masks how complex the process actually is. People need to know what's coming up, but you have to kind of give them the takeaway first. So I focus all of this stuff around what is your most important message. If people remember one sentence about the entire presentation, the entire pitch, the whole conversation that you're having, because most of our communication is done via conversation. If they remember one thing, what do you want that to be? That becomes your central message. And then everything that you speak about is focused to back up that statement that you made. The tricky thing, and where people I find get really lost, is that they have an idea of the theme that they want to speak about. They'll say, well, I want them to know how to lead their best lives. That tells us nothing. You might say, that's what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell it to you again. But how to lead your best life actually doesn't tell us anything.
That's a really good point.
It doesn't.
It's way too broad, isn't it?
Way too broad. If you told me that you can lead your best life with good sleep, proper nutrition, and owning cats, that works.
Okay.
That
so you're
totally
looking for a nut graph, essentially.
Yes, very
much. The thesis statement from high school English.
Straight up. And people forget about this, I think, because it feels too basic. Mm-hmm. But that's what it is. Whenever you're communicating with people, you need to take a position, present them with that position, and then back that position up. You're making an argument. That's what an argument is. Mm-hmm. And it's that process of backing up the position that you're taking that becomes your content.
So let's go back to the data presentation you gave to librarians. What was your thesis statement? What was your position there?
Well, of course, that would change depending on the database that I was teaching them on. But let's take one of the more infamous databases, which is Ovid. It's a medical database. Ovid is an excellent solution if your patron is looking for high-level, peer-reviewed medical information and has the capability of understanding the abstracts. That's the position. That's the statement. Yep.
Okay. So you're
if I'm speaking to a library crowd, they understand what all of that means. I don't need to simplify it.
Okay.
They already know those little bits and pieces. If I was saying that to the general public,
to me,
it would make absolutely no sense.
Right. I was waiting for the position. Yeah. I was like, surely you're not done yet.
That's the position.
Right.
I make it one sentence long. If someone from the general public was to come up to me and say, I want to use, and believe it or not, I used to get these questions because of my past work. I want to use Ovid, but it makes no sense. My position to them would be Ovid is designed for medical information professionals. Let me show you how to use PubMed.
Okay.
And then I direct them towards somewhere else.
My position is
not for you.
Yes.
My position is this is not for you.
Perfect.
This is.
Okay. So a lot of what you're doing is persuasion.
Yes. Almost all of it has an element of persuasion.
So if and essentially we as solopreneurs, we as business owners need to persuade people that we have the solution they need in mind. And everything you've said so far just perfectly ties into that. You have to speak to their need. You have to think from their perspective, not your own, because of course we want to push them to make the sale. We have to bring them along. So how do you recommend people do that?
The big thing is to understand who it is you're speaking to, which I know, again, sounds simplistic, but you have to have a very deep understanding of who it is you're speaking to, what their needs are, what is keeping them up at 2:00 in the morning, and how does your offering serve to that? Or at least how does it relate to that in some way, shape, or form? Even if it doesn't seem like it's explicitly related to that 2:00 in the morning worry, somewhere around there, you can probably find an in, because you want to find the context that's occupying their head. All communication is done in context. And when you're speaking to someone, it's the context of the audience that matters, not yours. The danger that I myself have definitely fallen into as a solopreneur, and that I see many other people, solopreneurs, people who work in corporations, kids who climb on rocks, like the thing that we all fall into, is becoming hyper-focused on the problem from our point of view. We know why this is good, but why it's good is from our perspective. You have to be able to step into the other person's shoes and say, why does this matter to them? Why do they care about it? What do they already think about it? What do they already know about it? Do they align in thought with the way that I think, or do I need to wrap the way that I think around their context and approach this problem differently? And that's
so how do you get yourself to do that? Like, because again, we're all very self-consumed, whether we mean to be or not. How do we get into someone else's mind frame?
Yeah, and it's not a problem if you are self-consumed, as long as you can step out of it.
Yeah.
We always operate within our own context. It's the only thing we can do. So to consciously step out of it takes effort and it takes time. And I research my audiences, whoever it is I'm speaking to. And it's not about asking specific, like there isn't a list of exact correct questions that you need to ask. It's about asking a lot of questions, being very, very curious, and trying not to prejudge what it is that, like the space that it is that they're coming from. So I will ask things like, what are the demographics of the people that I'm speaking to? Age, cultural makeup, educational background, political views, all of those different things that come with demographic questions. After that, I start to get into things like, what are their values? What do they claim their values to be? If you are approaching a corporation, what are their corporate values, the things that they put in the mission and vision statement and all of that? And then I say, okay, how do they behave? What are their behavioral values? Do they behave according to that mission and vision statement, or do they behave in a slightly different way? Are there other values that are coming up through the things that they talk about, the stuff that they post online, the way that they act towards other people that I need to pay attention to? I like to look at things like other activities that people are involved in. Do they contribute to any kind of charitable organizations? That's a big clue as to how they perceive different problems or where some of their values might be. All of these questions, what schools did they go to? Those kind of things like patriotism and loyalties, all of those affect the way people think. So I go through a raft of questions, just anything I can think of, and then I look it up. So that can be through social media, that can be through people's websites, that can be through discovery calls, talking to people directly before you go to make the pitch or to figure out what kind of service you want. I spend a lot of time doing that just so you can get inside their heads.
Oh, that is so good. A lot of people say go do research, but I love how you itemized the different things you look at, because that, I think, really helps people understand just how in-depth your research needs to be.
It does need to be in-depth, and it doesn't mean that it needs to be onerous. As you get good at doing this research, as you not even get good at it, as you get used to doing it, you tend to rifle through these questions faster and faster, and you get better at looking for and noticing the cues. So for an example, whenever I'm discussing persuasion with people, one of the things I tell them is look at the different kinds of individual value signals that people send. Clothing, the language that they use, whether or not they flash around their credentials. Those all give you cues as to what people want to see from you. So a great version of this is I speak with a lot of people in the financial industry, and some of my clients, I love to call them my fancy Chicago bankers. Bunch of bankers down in Chicago. Very, very different from my Northern Alberta, salt of the earth, heavy construction people, right? Total polar different worlds there. And with my bankers, they dress to the nines, to the absolute nice, finely tailored suits, expensive accessories, things that many people would say, oh, well, that's just flash and snobbery. It's not. It's not. The way they're dressing is signaling their competency and their success. Are you as good in this field as you say you are? Can you dress the part? Can you afford the clothes? Because if you can, it means that you're good at what you do. So if you start digging into those signals and peel back the layers and say, what are they telling me about them through this cue, through this signal, you can start to uncover what really does matter from people and what it is they need to hear from you in order to be persuaded. But you must step out of your own head in order to do that. That's the big thing. You can't look at them and say, oh, they're just being snobs, or, oh, they're just crass backcountry bumpkins driving a tractor. No, you can't say that. You have to say, what are they telling me?
So really what you're saying is no judgment.
No
You
judgment.
can't judge. You just have to observe and in a way mirror what you're seeing.
To a degree, yes. Another thing to understand is that they don't necessarily want to see the same thing from you as they want to see in themselves.
Oh, that's interesting.
This gets really, I'm going into my little rhetorical nerd zone here. I'll warn you right now.
Let's dive in.
Let's dig in. So within communication, whenever we're evaluating someone else, and we're always evaluating each other, humans are judgy people. It's what we do. One thing that we're looking for is signs that you are the right person to be telling me about this thing at this point in time. So if someone I will use the heavy construction example because there's lots going on there. Someone like me, highly educated city girl, goes up into remote northern Alberta like it's a plane flight and then a few hours drive up to a place where there are very few roads in and out. They don't want me to be pretending like I am from the country that they are from, like I'm from there, because that's fake. That's phony.
That's a good point.
Yeah, they know I'm not. I know I'm not. They want me to be able to relate to them and understand where they're coming from. But they asked me to come and tell them about this thing because I'm not them. So what do they need me to be? What are they expecting me to be? Who do they need me to be? And does that fit with what it is I'm going to present to them? So for solopreneurs, a lot of this comes down to, am I the right purveyor of this service or this thing or this product for this group of people? Am I who they need me to be? Sometimes the answer is you are perfect. You need to change nothing. Sometimes you need to morph a little bit to demonstrate that, yes, I might be this person from a very different context from you, but I understand what your problems are and this is how. And sometimes you might say, you know what? I'm the wrong person. Go to this person because they're a better fit. And then you have a better experience overall. You'll actually raise yourself in your esteem when you're able to do that. So understanding what other people expect of you and figuring out whether or not you can ethically and reasonably meet that is an important aspect of all of this. It sounds fraught. Usually it's pretty straightforward.
Well, I think that makes sense. And I'll tell you how I used to work in financial services. And yes, the dress code was a step above. Yeah. There was no wearing jeans. It was suits. Men had to wear long sleeves. I don't think they had to wear a tie. But I actually bought a lot. I know, right? I actually bought a lot of suits for that job because it fit what I was doing. But I feel like their financial services has that dress code because that's what people expect. I don't want to trust my money with someone wearing T-shirts and torn jeans.
Yeah.
And so it's not just what we're trying to portray. It is like you're saying, what people expect from us.
Yeah. And you want to demonstrate that you're aware of what's going on. I would not dress the same way for my Chicago bankers as I would for my heavy equipment operators. If I were to walk into their space wearing the heels and with the studded bag and with the tailored suit, they would look at me and say, you are completely out of touch.
Yes.
You can't wear that on a job site. They would still want me to look the part in terms of having decent clothes, but sensible shoes are important here.
I think so.
And where you get into this, it's not just with clothing, it's with the language that you use.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with the etiquette that you take on when you're working with different people. And doing that audience research helps you figure out these kinds of finer points. So I think that makes it easier to communicate.
Right. What's going through my mind now as I'm listening to you is really, we have to know who we are. And that's like our pillar, but we can bend it towards so we can be authentically ourselves and speak with bankers, or we can be authentically ourselves and speak with construction workers. It's just a slight variation of that core.
Bingo. It's a facet. We've got, we're beautiful diamonds. We've got lots and lots of facets. Which one do you need to shine at this moment? Sometimes it takes a little bit of polishing to really get it to sparkle the way that you want, or a little bit of practice. I've fallen on my face before when I was working with a new audience and I didn't know what to expect. And I thought one thing and it wasn't quite right. But you adapt and adjust in the interim. And another thing you might want to ask yourself, again, as a solopreneur, is, do I want to be casting my net very broadly? Am I comfortable communicating across a lot of people? Can I, across a lot of audiences, I should say? Can I be a bit of a chameleon? Or do I want to niche in with one group that I get and just go hard into that field to the exclusion of others? Both options can be correct. It all depends on what you're comfortable doing.
I like that. So just a minute ago, you referenced times that you've stood in front of an audience and you had misjudged. A lot of us, and I'm going to say us, because as humans, we are typically afraid of situations where we're afraid of being exposed. We're afraid of being called out. And speaking, I think that's probably the root of the fear of speaking. Now, years ago, I was even nervous getting on a video call with a new client. And I think it was just lack of experience at that time. But over the years, I've been really proud of myself for, I don't get those jitters as badly as I used to. I'm so much more comfortable with who I am and what I do. But nevertheless, we all experience big nerves, fear, all kinds of stuff when we are asked to do a formal presentation. So how do you help people overcome that fear?
The number one thing that I find helps people overcome their presentation fears is to get extremely clear on that core message and on that core content. Because when you're focused on that and you've tied it intimately to what your audience needs, you're no longer focusing your brain on all the scary things going on inside your head. You are able to say, this is the thing that I'm talking about. These are the people that I need to tell it to. And that moves your focus outwards instead of inwards. It's not that the jitters disappear. It's that they become background noise.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Professional speakers get scared before we go on stage. We get nervous too. It's a nerve-wracking thing. And it's a very primitive brain response that we have to speaking. Very, very like amygdala trying to keep you safe here. Trying to keep you safe, Kathryn. This is why you want to cut and run from the stage, because you're in a very vulnerable position. That is our lizard brain speaking, as Seth Godin would say. So you don't necessarily want to focus on getting rid of it. Because if that's your focus, guess what? That's what you're thinking about. I'm scared. I shouldn't be scared, but I'm so scared. How do I tamp down the scare? You tamp it down by focusing on something else.
Right.
The thing you have to focus on is your message and the people that you're speaking to, which is outside of you.
I can relate to this. And again, let's go back to, as I said, I used to be jittery just talking to a new client on a video call. But yeah, the more experienced I got and the more I refined my message, I felt like, I could put my focus there. And of course, that brings all of that elevated tension down, kind of controls it a little bit. Are there any other tricks? I mean, getting that focus outside yourself, I think that's a great place to start. But what about breathing or anything like that?
Breathing absolutely is important. I usually, when I'm teaching things like public speaking classes in a group, the first thing that I focus on is breathing, because breath is the only autonomic physical response that you have some kind of control over. Everything else, heart rate, you can't mentally slow your heart rate down, but you can slow down your breathing. And it's through deep breathing, usually counted breathing techniques. So in for 3, out for 5, in for 3. And when you do that controlled breathing, it does slow down your heartbeat. It does drop your blood pressure, which are some of those flight or fight responses that we get. So you're effectively tricking your body into thinking that, hey, you're not panicking.
There you go.
Breathing drops the heart rate, which drops the blood pressure, which takes away some of that cortisol from your brain, which lets your frontal lobe, the thinky part of your brain, kind of get back in gear. All of that, it's a cascade response to helping you slow down. So breathing is a big thing. If you you walk on stage, you don't know what to do, your brain goes blank, take a minute, look at the people, give them the knowing look while you breathe in, breathe out, and breathe in again. Or I always bring water with me because I'm not drinking, I'm breathing.
Oh, wow.
No one questions you taking a sip of water while you talk. Talking is drying. Right? We know this. So you can take a sip of water and just look thoughtful while you're doing it. You're consciously calming yourself down in the moment. So yes, breathing absolutely matters. The other thing I like to do when those jitters do set in, and this is a way of forcing me to look at the audience, to focus on them, is to ask them a question right out of the gate. So if this is a one-on-one meeting with a new client, whether it's on Zoom, on the phone, whatever it might be. So tell me about what's going on right now. How's that for a vague question, right? Like that can be absolutely anyone at anything, but it does two things. First up, it immediately gets the other person talking instead of you. So you can get out of your head and you can listen to them. The next thing it's going to do is tell you where those other people are at. You say, what's going on with you right now? Why are you worried about this at this point in time? It gives you a minute to listen more deeply and get into their context, which again gets you out of your head. And it gives you something more concrete to respond to instead of just giving your talk or giving a presentation. Now, if you're speaking with a big group, this can look like questions such as, tell me how many of you have experienced XYZ, raise your hands. And then you look at them and you respond to that. Oh, fewer than I expected. Isn't that interesting? Well, guess what? Follow it up with something. Or, wow, almost the whole room. That doesn't surprise me because you prepare those kinds of answers before you give your talk, right? It looks like it's off the cuff, but it's not. Questions like that, though, force you to look at your audience, and it creates kind of this mental space of having a conversation with a bunch of people instead of being the speaker, which helps to bring down that nervousness.
That is so smart. I've never thought, I've always played around with like, what's that intro line? But to make the intro line a question, and I can't help but feel it creates rapport with your audience as well.
Instantly.
Yes.
Instant rapport. Because now you're saying, I see you and I want to hear from you first.
Nice.
Ooh, I like that. As an audience, I like that. If you're online, that can be a poll. Have a poll ready, or say, what's the first word that comes up in your head when you think of XYZ? Type it into the chat. And then you respond to those things right away. And now you're speaking with the audience instead of at them.
That totally makes all the difference.
Yeah. Completely.
Okay. So now let's move, because I love that we've been talking about the one-on-one conversation, but let's move to actual speaking and doing presentations. I see this as a step into authority. It's going to build your authority. It's going to attract clients so you don't have to chase them down as much. How do you get into it? If you've just been thinking about it and you're starting from scratch, how do you get started?
It's always going to be get started with audience research, figure out which audiences you want to speak for or who is the right customer for your product, and then go and find them. That is going to look very, very different for different people, of course. But something that you have to remember is that there's always a place where people who want a thing congregate. So if you are in the fitness industry, there's going to be gyms with memberships. There is going to be interest groups and meetup groups and hobby groups. around your city or around your area. There are going to be online forums where the sort of people that you want to serve gather. You can find those audiences. If you speak to corporate groups, I largely speak to corporate groups. There are associations. There's services groups like Rotary and Lions clubs that often attract a lot of people who are in business. So whatever it is you speak about, there's a place where those people congregate. You want to find them and then reach out to someone who is part of that group and say, hey, I've got this topic. Is this of interest to you? I would love to speak about it. And most of the time they'll say yes.
They're always looking for help with content, right?
People are always looking for help with content. Situations like this where one person has content and the other person has a podcast, they are looking for content. So you really do. It's that old adage of find out where your audience or where your customer group is hanging out and then approach them. Now, your approach does need to meet their needs. So if I'm going to approach a whole bunch of Rotary clubs in my city, those different clubs have different group makeups. One of them in my city, I'll use the name because why not? Glenora in Edmonton is very much made up of upper echelon corporate types. Senior leaders, people who want to be seen, they have good reputations, probably higher standing in the community. They're a little more hoity-toity than some of the other groups. So I want to make sure that the way that the message that I'm going to send to them or the thing that I'm going to propose to them matches that group's ethos. If I go to the Southwest Association Rotary, it's more the mom and pop shops. Individuals who are mid-level in their career, but are really interested in the community building. So I might be talking about the same subject, but I'm going to pitch it differently so that it makes sense for those different organizations. So even if it sounds like they're all Rotary, the different groups are going to be a little bit different. So make sure you tailor your offer to what it is they need. Make your offer specific. The topic that you are speaking on should be very specific. Otherwise, they won't know what it is you're offering to them. And be very open in terms of how you're going to speak to them, when you're going to speak to them. Flexibility at that stage is the key. And then you rinse, wash, and you repeat over and over and over. When I started this off, I think that I hit every single Rotary club within a 3-hour drive within Edmonton, because getting that stage time in was really important, but it was also a very accessible way for me to reach out to a lot of audiences. Not all of them got back to me. Most of them did. Same thing with associations. Not all the associations will get back to you, but most of them will. So it really is that matter of just taking a deep breath and saying, I've got this. It might be for you. Would you like me to come?
I like that. Well, you did that with me, actually, because you pitched your topic to me. But one thing that really stood out to me when I went to your website, it's all about speaking. And I'm like, is this really a fit? But when I go back to your email, you say this works for solopreneurs. I am a solopreneur. And I was like, okay, then we can make it fit.
Make it fit.
You found that connection point with me to where I could figure out how to introduce you to my audience and make this relevant.
Yeah. And you can really figure out all kinds of different relevancy. Like, let's say, again, you're the fitness person. You're looking at expanding your client base. Does the Glenora Rotary Club necessarily immediately jump to mind when you think, where do fitness people hang out? Not necessarily, but if you say a fitness thing for busy corporate executives, there you go. Like, you can make that logical leap for people fairly readily. This does not mean that I think that you should go and seek out audiences where there isn't an obvious fit, where you can't immediately see, oh, yes, my thing is relevant to them because of XYZ. If it feels like a reach for you, it's probably a reach for them as well. But don't be shy in adapting your message away from that initial core audience to test it out and to see if it does work.
Now, do you recommend starting on a small stage, like you're talking about Rotary clubs, just smaller groups of people where you can build your chops and get more comfortable with being on stage?
So many different ways of doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Kathryn, this is, and I get very excited because you really can find an audience size to suit any person. My approach is, if you are willing to give it a try for 30 people, there's very minor differences to doing it for 300. Very minor differences. Most of it is just straight up psychology of saying, oh, that's a lot of people in front of me. But as far as I'm concerned, once you're past like that 20 person mark, it's numbers, nothing more.
Okay.
If you are terrified, start small. If it's the size of the group that intimidates you, don't immediately cast your hat in for the next big citywide open mic night, right? Go with what feels like a stretch, but isn't so scary that it makes you want to throw up.
Oh, that's a good distinction. Yeah, because you do want to stretch yourself, but you don't want to get sick over it.
Exactly. And this can look like so many different things. If you are a solopreneur, but you are also still working, as many people who start up their businesses, we keep our 9-to-5s for a long time. Start by offering a training session to people in your company. Hey, I also do this thing. Can I give a talk about this at a lunch and learn session for whoever wants to come? Maybe you'll get 5 people in the room. That's a great start. And then take it to another company and another one. My start in what I consider true public speaking was in the library conference circuit. So if you do belong to an industry or you work with industry that has conferences, they need breakout sessions. And that's going to be anywhere from 15 to 50 people, depending on the size of the conference. But that is an absolutely excellent place to get your start, because now you're in an environment where there's lots of people doing what you're doing. There's lots of people speaking, and that audience is going to go to the next breakout session right after. So if you do want to go and cry in the back and beat yourself up because you feel like you did a terrible job, which you probably didn't. You probably did awesome. Your brain is just messing with you.
But we always feel that way.
You can do that because they're off to their next talk. So conferences are a great place to start. What I would not do is say, I want big crowds and I'm going to limit my crowds, because the vast majority of speaking, both professional and non-professional, is done in front of small crowds.
Interesting.
They are your gold mine.
Okay.
Small crowds are your gold mine. And I find that the most typical crowd size is between 30 and 100 people.
I would never have guessed that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We think big stage, right?
Yes.
That is not where the bulk of the work is happening.
Interesting.
And it's not where the bulk of the sales are happening either.
Okay. And so let's say you're wanting to get compensated for speaking. You're going after a lot of these smaller venues, I should say. And how much can you expect to get paid for speaking?
It's so varied. And that's where I often say that if you want to get into paid speaking, I strongly recommend that you look at it as a subset of your business.
Okay.
It is one of the services you offer. It is not the service that you offer, because it is difficult to break into. Initially, a good number that often gets bandied about, and this will vary from market to market, for a beginning speaker who's they're just getting started going for paid gigs, is about the $1,500 mark if you're doing it live. Virtual speaking has a different pay scale.
It's much lower, isn't it?
It's much lower.
Okay.
So a lot of my talks, if I'm working with a smaller organization right now, I know they only have a handful of members. Associations at the moment are really hard done for. A lot of them do not have a lot of money. My virtual talks will be around 1,500, and that's kind of my basement level. Most of my talks, and I limit myself to only a couple of those per year at the most. Most of my talks run from the $4,500 to $5,000 mark virtually. I am someone with many years of speaking experience behind me. My in-person talks, it depends on the talk, but they will typically range from the $6,000 to the $8,000 mark. I have built myself up there over years. Mm-hmm. If you're just getting started, $1,500 for a local association is a really solid number.
Okay. That gives us a benchmark, just something to aim for.
It gives you a benchmark. It's enough to say, hey, I treat this like a professional. I am a professional. My message is polished. you will get a ton of value, and I will give a good entertainment experience as well. Like by that, I mean, I will give a good performance, because the performance is part of your offering when you are engaging in professional speaking. It's enough to get people to treat you seriously, which is what you want. But what you're not trying to do is claim that you have the kind of speaker cred that would net you those $8,000 talks, because that takes years to get to. But it's a benchmark. For virtual speaking is trickier because, again, there's that perceived value. Like I said, most of mine are around that $4,500 mark. I do a few for the $1,500 mark every year. But if you are just getting started, 1,000 is a good benchmark for speaking. What I find is of greater benefit to most solopreneurs is to say, okay, I would like to get paid, but where's the real ROI coming in? And this is where you have to decide whether you speak for fee or for free. I sometimes speak for free, very rarely, if it is the perfect marketing fit for me.
Because
Not
there's reciprocal value.
Reciprocal value. This marketing fit, if someone comes to me and says, this will give you great exposure, this is the perfect market for you, will you do it for free? Automatically, I say no, because they didn't pitch me. They didn't pitch me well. I know going into a conversation whether or not I'm willing to do it for free. And that's based on my own research before I even get on the phone with them. I know.
Oh, these are good tips.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that, by the way, that kind of chutzpah I have built up over years. When I started, it was all about exposure. I needed exposure to audiences. I needed exposure to my market. Those Rotary talks were all done for free. Those association talks were all done for free because that was marketing at an early stage of my business. And if what you want to sell is a service that isn't speaking, don't feel like you need to charge for speaking. Like that is a different service in and of itself. So you really do need to say, how does speaking fit into my business mix? If you're mostly looking at it just as a marketing strategy, I wouldn't sweat about the fees.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. If you want it to be a distinct service that you offer right up on your website, start at $1,500 for in-person. And then bump it up. Every talk you give, you bump it up a little bit and you figure out what your audience can bear.
Okay. And that's true for pricing of any product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to treat it like any other product. What are other people charging? What do I think? Do I have the credential? Am I selling am I a prestige product?
There you go. Yes.
That's the question. Am I a prestige product or am I the everyday, very accessible product? Price yourself accordingly.
And there's value to both. It's not like one is better than the other.
Well, that's just it. If what you're really looking at selling is an ongoing consultation service or a product that you have or a coaching package or something else that isn't the speaking, then lower pricing might make a lot more sense because it makes you more accessible so you can sell those other items. So yeah, and what I find with really with any sort of individual, whether you're a solopreneur or you're operating with a small team, is that speaking is some of the best, highest performing ROI marketing that you can do.
Okay.
Because it gives you an audience that is going to listen to you for a certain period of time with minimal to no interruption unless you invite it. And it gives you time to demonstrate your expertise in an environment where you're already being put forth as an expert.
That's helpful too, isn't it? I mean, it's difficult to, in any other situation, it's difficult to find that.
Yeah, it really, really is. But if you come out and say, I am going to go and actively look for places where I can speak about my area of expertise, whether or not they pay me, because I now have the opportunity to prove to them for 30 straight minutes that I'm the person they want, that is massive value.
Very
massive
good.
value. And, any speaker will tell you that the best marketing you can do as a speaker is to give an outstanding speech. And I think that that holds true for nearly any business, not just a speaking business, but any business that you do. Best marketing you can do is to give a great talk.
Nice. So there you have it, solopreneurs. Go give excellent speaks.
Don't be afraid of the stage. Don't
Yes.
be afraid of the video camera. Don't be afraid of doing this in front of a lot of people. They
That's right.
want and need what you are offering.
So true. So now let's talk a little bit more about you. Did you always think you would be a solopreneur or run your own business?
Oh gosh, for years I was absolutely convinced I was going to be the manager of a large urban library at some point.
Okay, that's right. You said you have a master's degree in library science.
This is a business that I realized I could do after working in another field for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't just the speaking business, it's the communication training that I built up. That is the focus of what it is that I do. So, did I have visions as a kid of growing up and doing this? No, I didn't even know it existed for a long time. I was petrified of performing in front of people up until probably my early 20s.
Really?
Terrified.
So a lot of the tips you're sharing about overcoming fear, that's from firsthand experience.
Firsthand experience. And I got past that fear partially because I fell in love with acting, with the storytelling aspect of it. And you can't get into acting unless you get over that fear of being watched. So I got into that in my mid to late teens, really getting over that fear of being watched. And so that was a slow build up into what I'm doing now. It's part of the reason why I can tell people, this is how we're going to get through it. Here's how you're going to get past that fear. Here's how you're going to work through the nervousness and the jitters and the brain blanks, because I lived that for years. But because I was so scared at first of being in front of people and being judged, being found wanting, no, I never would have predicted that this was the career that I'd end up in, helping people through that. But here we are. And yet, here we are.
So when you took the launch, did you go cold turkey, or did you keep a full-time job while you were beginning your consultancy?
I kept a full-time job for, let me do some quick head math, about 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Slow build.
Was that overwhelming to try to be juggling two things that long?
It got to that point. It sure as heck got to that point. And that was what kind of finally pushed me into okay, you're leaving the full-time job. You're now ready to do this on your own. I took a slow approach because I am very conservative when it comes to money.
Okay.
I like knowing where it's coming from. I like having a big fat runway and cushion in my bank account. I want that security that's there. So initially, when I started my business, I only took on 1 or 2 clients. I was very much focused around the individual coaching, helping people become better corporate presenters at work. That's where the foundation was. That's what I learned. That's where I learned the demand was from the talks that I was giving in libraries. Okay, so people want help with this. I'll do it as a one-on-one coach. And then it quickly grew into group classes. And then it grew into consulting. And then it grew into professional speaking. And on and on. So that was a slow build over many years. At the point where I knew that it was time to leave was 2 kids into the mix. I was staying up at all hours of the night to complete all the work. And it was getting to the point where I either move out on my own or I burn out in a spectacular way. And the stars kind of aligned. I set 2 goals for myself. And for all of you solopreneurs out there who might have been in this situation where you're juggling the full-time and the business, I kind of set myself a time limit where either I would be making X amount in my business consistently over a couple of years, or because the company that I was with often had, we'll call them staffing fluctuations, or because I had to be let go and I was about to receive a severance. And I hit both of those at the same time. Like,
interesting.
It was the stars aligned, Kathryn. They just aligned. I'm like, I'm losing my mind and I'm bringing in this much. And we've just received another massive funding cut. And logically, I'm the only person who can go at this point. And it all aligned. So had that funding cut not happened, had I not needed to leave because of other reasons, I would have probably left within 4 months.
Okay.
Because everything was aligning.
Do you recommend doing it that way, sort of setting milestones for yourself? When these things happen, then it's time?
I think it's a good idea, because what you're doing is creating safety nets and kind of fail safes and whatnot. When I was initially creating this business, like the early years where I was very much still juggling the full-time and had definitely not reached the point where I could launch fully on my own, there was a lot of value put on, you have to put all of your eggs into your solopreneur basket. That if you aren't putting everything you've got, if you're not taking the plunge, making the risk, then you're not really committed. I think that is absolute nonsense.
I agree with you.
Total nonsense. Because if you don't set yourself up for your business to be able to weather the ups and downs, then you're going to need to go back anyway. Because if the money isn't coming in, then you can't sustain your business. I never placed a great value on where the money to sustain my business was coming in from. If it was coming in from my 9 to 5 and that's where it had to come in from, I'm totally fine with that. That was not a value statement on me as a solopreneur. That was just the situation while I built things up. But at some point, I knew it would become unsustainable to do both. So what are your safety nets? Is it a number in your bank account to float you for a year or two while things really get rolling? Is it a steady number of income over a certain number of years, as it was for me? Is it that you're going to do this until you get forced out because of corporate restructuring? I don't know. Whatever that safety net is, understand what that is so that you can make the decision to go all in, kind of with both feet firmly planted in the real world.
Okay.
That
now
was a
you've
really
shared,
long way of saying yes.
You shared so many wise things. I love the way you approach your business, but we all make mistakes along the way. What would you say is the biggest mistake you've made?
The biggest mistake that I've made, I would say, was not being bold enough and forward enough in my speaking fees.
Really?
I stayed too low for too long.
Okay.
And part of that was my own self-doubt and my own fear over, I'm never going to get another talk again. This is the last one. And I'm sure that people listening have had that experience. This is going to be my last client.
Yes.
And you cry yourself to sleep at night, and then another client comes along. So I think that had I been a little more bold and confident in the value of what I was bringing sooner, I could have hit higher speaking fees. I could be where I am now a couple of years earlier.
Okay.
So I kind of held myself back.
We do that, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's an important mistake to call out, because it's all mindset. We have to believe in ourselves more than anybody else does.
It really is all mindset. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't want any kind of flexibility in there. True. Or that you want to overestimate your value. When the pandemic hit, as you can imagine, people who are involved in live speaking and live training like I am, like, it rocked our world. And at first, there was a lot of, within the speaking community and the in-person corporate training community, there was a lot of stick to your fees, even if you've gone virtual, because the value of your intellectual property is the same. That's true. The value of your intellectual property is the same, but that is not the only thing that creates a perceived market value of what it is you're doing. Part of the perceived value is whether or not you have gone to the expense and the inconvenience of physically showing up in person. People attach a dollar figure to that. Part of it is their own perceived value of, will we get as big of an impact out of people online if they're watching it on their computer screens as we would if they are in person, because they can talk to each other, they can talk to you, etc. That's a different dollar value. So, many people had to adjust our fee expectation for virtual, and we're now realizing there might be two separate fees. If you're a big celeb, there might be no difference in the kind of fee you can command.
But you've got to be pretty big for that.
But you got to be pretty big for that. You have to be very aware of what your market is willing to tolerate. So on one hand, I absolutely wish that I pushed myself for higher in-person fees earlier in my career. That was a self-confidence thing. But right now, I am very happy that I returned to a lot of speaking for free models in those early stages of pandemics, as corporations figured out that, wait a minute, there is a value in this medium. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to prove to them that there was value and then get the higher paid corporate training gigs if I didn't say, hey, everything is on its head right now. Are you guys having trouble with your video conferences? You're a good client. Let me give you a free webinar. I went back to speaking for free.
Right.
And then I said, okay, have me back. This is the training that I can offer. This is what I can do for your upcoming conference and your keynote. You've already seen me do my thing. Here's my fee.
Okay.
So flexibility, right?
Yes. I like that. Lauren, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
It's been a delight, Kathryn. I've loved digging into this stuff.
Oh, it's my passion as well. So I just so appreciate you bringing all of your knowledge and experience and sharing it with us. So if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about you, where should they go?
Best place is my website, laurensergy.com, LaurenSergy.com. You can also very easily find me on YouTube. If you just look up my name, I've got a ton of videos on communication tips and tricks and whatnot on my YouTube channel. It's all on my website as well. On my website, you'll find more information about my books, my offerings, etc. And by all means, if anyone listening has a question on the top of your head that you're like, Lauren might know, send me an email, lauren@laurensergy.com. It might end up being a communication Q&A video on YouTube, if you give me permission. Either way, I will be happy to back and forth with you over this sort of stuff. I love it. I love helping out other solopreneurs about it. So please reach out.
That is so generous. Thank you, Lauren. That was such an interesting interview, and I hope you will go ahead and visit Lauren's website and learn more about how speaking can help you build your business. But there are so many ways to build your business, and the number one way I've discovered is to focus on building your community. For that, you need to join the Hub. At Solopreneur Life, the Hub is where all of our members come together. We're on a daily basis, actually, but specifically once a month for training and expert advice on how to grow your business. So if you're serious about actually achieving your goals, the Hub is for you. Visit us at solopreneurlife.com/hub, and I'll look for you on the inside. In the meantime, stay awesome.